Well, I think it's about time. 3 o'clock on
Three
a
o'clock.
Thursday. It's time for a wrap party, isn't it?
It's 1 o'clock for me, 3 o'clock for you.
3 o'clock. Yes, I'm in the
Perfect timing.
Midwest. Seth, you are on the West Coast. Welcome to the wrap party. This is our third one. We are having Seth back again, Sef McCullough, who was with me last time 2 weeks ago, and we were kind of talking about everything. I don't know, everything retouching. Um, you know, I it's great to have you back to kind of continue our discussion specifically about how to find retouchers and how retouchers are marketing themselves. We wanted to dive a little bit more into that information. So for this wrap party, that's what we'll cover. I'm Peter Hunner, co-founder of VeryBusy.io and owner of Honey Retouch. Sef McCullough, retoucher extraordinaire, your mentor, your industry veteran. So fittingly, we have some experience here and want to start sharing and talking about some of this stuff. And we received a good amount of questions after our last live that we're going to cover here in this section. Specifically, some stuff more, I guess we'll start off here. I kind of want to recap what we talked about last week regarding, how do you find a retoucher that is a good fit for your project? And kind of from the other side, if you're a retoucher, how do you find clients that are a good fit for how you work and the kind of work you want to get? So diving into that, I think we both agreed that word of mouth for our careers has been the leading factor of gaining clients and finding good fitting clients that understand our capabilities. We did have a question on this one topic, though. Besides word of mouth, how else are people promoting themselves? How else are you going about finding work? So not just word of mouth, but okay, let's talk about let's say like portfolio reviews. There's a lot of similar things that you could look at the photography or photographers what they do. But I wanted to start diving into other ways beyond just word of mouth and having a website. What else can we do to promote ourselves, and where else can people look to find good retouchers?
Yeah,
Um,
that's great.
let's start off there actually, and then I was going to recap everything, but I'm just going to kind of recap as we go and we hit each section here. So let's talk about the promotion part of it.
That sounds good.
What have you, other factors? Have you tried other forms of marketing? I know you do a lot of videos. You do a lot of, you've done a lot of things this socially within our industry. What hasn't worked, and what have you tried?
Yeah. And well, first of all, thanks for having me back.
Of course.
That was a great conversation we had last week. I think we covered a lot of topics that are really important to people. I think what's unique about the way we're approaching the content that we talk about in these conversations is that kind of changing the perspective a little bit, because I think as retouchers and such a niche sort of insular community, and also the craft of retouching, highly technical, highly artistic too, at the same time, we have plenty to talk about just amongst ourselves, but taking this a little bit of a different angle on this, on these podcasts, is looking at it a little bit more from the position of the producer once again, and really trying to see how we integrate into the industry as a whole and actually give people other than just retouchers useful tools, strategies, techniques for getting work done, getting the work done. And so that's, I think, unique to what we talk about here. I used to, for many years, just pretty much rely on the word of mouth thing. I came
It's
up,
good when it's working, right? Yeah.
and you can kind of get a little complacent. I think I came up in, in the advertising industry. My first big ad job was at Wyden Kennedy, and I met so many people there over the course of 6-7 years of working in the retouching studio.
Yep.
Project managers, studio managers, producers, account people, art directors, designers, the whole spectrum of agency folks. Yeah. So
Totally. Yep.
after I left there, and all those people spread out over the West Coast, the East Coast, I had contacts everywhere.
Totally.
and people knew me.
Planted those seeds, and then they, yep, right.
And, you know, that's not everybody has that kind of luck that I had from that background. And I kind of rested on that for many years because it was just bringing me steady work. And I think around pandemic time, when everything got shook up, turned upside down, everybody went and spread out even further. You
Yeah.
know, some people got out of the industry altogether, you know,
Career changes, totally.
became avocado farmers. You know, it's a classic one.
Doesn't sound too bad.
It sounds great sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I had to start rethinking the way that I connect with past clients and finding new clients too. Because
Hmm.
if you don't know anybody, word of mouth doesn't really work for you initially.
Yeah.
So
It's
I'm
hard.
definitely not like one of the big social media guys out there. I'm no like Aaron Nace or Jesus Ramirez. Those guys crush it on the social. I'm like tiny compared to them. So what do you do if you're totally out of the social game? If you're like, how do I even get traction on Facebook? Or, you know,
Yeah.
maybe I'll make some YouTube videos. Great, but those platforms are so established and so saturated that
Very
it's
saturated,
going to
right?
take so much production, regular production, to even start to bubble up in front of the people who might be looking to hire somebody like you.
Hmm. Yep.
My big thing is LinkedIn because it has the most eyes from people who are professionals around the industry that we're in.
Yep.
So from word of mouth to actively trying to connect with potential clients online for me pretty much was 100% LinkedIn these days.
LinkedIn is a hot one, I think, right now, at least.
Exactly. And I do some coaching too. I'm working with four coaching partners right now. And their question is like, yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I did have a profile up there. I don't do much with it. I, maybe I'm more comfortable on Facebook or something like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm like, don't worry about the fact that you're not a LinkedIn pro right now. Just hop on there, start paying attention to people who come up who do interesting work,
Hmm.
and simply just talk to them about the interesting work that you're seeing on LinkedIn. Send them a
Yeah.
message, send them a connection.
I think that's the unique thing about LinkedIn, or what's nice about it is being able to connect with somebody, send them a message, either starting up a conversation. Um,
Yeah.
you know, Earlier on, I would do a lot of really early on connecting with people and just asking for informational interviews. From a retouching standpoint, trying to understand people's jobs and what their needs might be in the retouching world. And going forward, I since we're building software now too for VeryBusy, I address things in a way where I look for a pain point in people's lives, in their work life, whether it be from a producer, an art director, this talking with them, being like, hey, what's not working with your process right now? Hey, are you guys having issue turning retouching around fast enough? Are you having budget issues? Are and then seeing, hey, where could I fit in there? Like, how could I, as a retoucher, make your life easier? Um, and LinkedIn, I think, can play a pivotal role in actually finding people and reaching out to people, not just as a retoucher, but also as somebody looking for a retoucher too. Being present on some of these places, just at least having somewhat of a presence, is just like a first step of like, hey, I'm out here. You can at least find me if you're looking. Hopefully, you may have to go deep sometimes, but
Right.
after a while, things start to build and some of these connections start to intertwine and stuff. So,
And
um,
and I think what you said about the conversations is super important for me. Is not just trying to connect with somebody and sell them something.
mhm.
We we're all used to that, and that stuff, click, swipe, it's
Yeah.
it's in the it's in the trash. So I think those genuine conversations about the work that someone does, whether it be the visual work that you're seeing online, maybe they're posting the last campaign that they helped produce,
Hmm.
that they're really proud of the work. Don't connect with them and say, "Hey, I'm a retoucher, hire me."
Yeah, exactly. And
Engage with the work legitimately.
another approach to that too, a spin on that is, I go back to like when I was talking about information interviews when I was younger and getting into the business, trying to learn stuff that I didn't have access to directly. Jumping in if you admire someone's work, or maybe there's a creative team that released a big project and from a big brand, and you really liked it, and you find maybe who was involved with it, and like, hey, can I buy a coffee, or would you be open for a quick call? I'd love to hear you guys' process of how you rolled this out, just kind of high level. Finding interest in their job or like how they did something, I think is something. I think people like to talk about what they do, especially if you're complimentary of it.
Yeah.
And again, trying to figure out, like, they're like, oh, and you learn, hey, we have this beautiful production, everything, but there's a lot of hiccups on the back end because I don't know, something happened in retouching or something happened in delivery or this or that, and then that can
Like,
get you
there
thinking, like, hey, well,
is there a
what?
good story in there? Because we
Yeah,
all love to
exactly.
tell those stories about, like, what happened along the way. Did we
Hmm.
almost crash and burn? What was a surprise that we never saw coming? I think for a retoucher on there who's doing outreach, thinking in terms of those stories is a great conversation
Oh,
starter.
totally.
And you know, I always say don't sell when you're having legitimate conversations about
Hmm.
creative work online in LinkedIn, but make sure your profile is
It's selling
always
something.
selling,
Yeah. Yeah.
because what you want is someone to be interested enough in you and the conversation that maybe you're having,
Totally.
enough to just go click on your profile. Then at that point it's like, hey, I'm a retoucher, hire me, and this is my work, and there's zero friction between you
Totally.
landing
Yeah.
here and seeing what it is that I do.
You bring up a good point here. Selling yourself via profile. When somebody clicks on there, they can immediately understand what you are about and what you do. Um, and when I feel like when people are looking for retouchers, or when retouchers are marketing themselves, I've gotten a lot of feedback from different ways we've tried to lay out our website or promote ourselves and stuff throughout the years. And one thing I keep coming back to is there was always, and I see it a lot today, where I, getting into retouching, a lot of times people go through transitions. Maybe they were assisting, or they're a digital tech. Maybe they were a photographer and now they want to get more into retouching, or but there's that transition period where you're not full making all your money off retouching, but you want to get into it. You still have to do your other work. uh you go to somebody's website, they're like, hey, I'm a retoucher, I'm a digital tech, I'm a photographer, I'm a editor, they list all these things they are.
Right.
And that can be a big turnoff. And the feedback I always got was, what, if you're going to be a retoucher, be a retoucher. Have a retouching website. Focus it on retouching. Especially if you're looking for repeat clients, or some of these clients that are really just, they're looking for a retoucher.
Yeah.
Um, and when we made the switch from cutting out digital teching and gear rental and stuff, and just solely focusing on retouching, that's when we saw growth in terms of people finding us and hiring as a retoucher.
Right.
So when you put your foot out there, you want to put your best foot forward, and
Yep.
whether it be LinkedIn profile, your website, stuff like this. When the art directors are landing on your site, they quickly want to understand, hey, you know, this is the kind of retouching they do. Look at, they have a portfolio of food.
Yeah.
Hey, we're shooting food. Great. Let's look at the kind of stuff they've done, so they can quickly get in, see what they need to find. They can, if you have a bunch of abstract fashion editorial stuff, they're like, this is probably not the best fit for us. It doesn't look like they've done a lot of food.
Right.
Um, and there's that whole other topic of, should you be really niche in what you do? Like, I am a high end commercial, cinnamon roll foot, retoucher. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe
totally.
not that niche, but um, and you know what? I when I was coming up, everybody says you got to get specific, you got to be into something, you got to niche down into something. But as it is now, like if you look at our Honey Retouch website, we have a lot of different work. We from food to
Really diverse body of work
it is,
that Honey has done at a super high level too.
and so it's changed my perception of you don't have to be specific in exactly what you're doing. Um, we when it comes to how we retouch and how we work, a lot of it is, you know, taste and good look stuff. A lot of the work we do too, we rely on the feedback from the art directors and that. So I'd say we are more on the technical kind of side of working with like collaborating with people rather than people giving us stuff and that we're the creative front of it. We're not so
Yeah.
much creative retouches, but more on the technical like production kind of side of retouching.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what kind of works a bit better. And maybe if you are more of a creative retoucher or creative compositor or something, you might end up naturally getting more into like a niche that you're really good at or that maybe people know you as. But from a advertising standpoint and marketing, we just try to put up good work that we've worked on that we're proud of. We never really got specific on it, but there's retouchers that they only do auto retouching or they only do food, and I think that's fine too. I think it comes down to you want to put out there, you want to show what you want to do. So if you are listing yourself as a photographer, retoucher, digital tech editor, art director, creative director, the list goes on. I think people are going to have a hard understanding of when they would need to hire you,
Yeah.
why they would need to hire you. And I think also it shows, a little misguidedness in that, if I want to hire somebody great for my project, I want to know this is what they're focusing on. This is what they do, right?
Totally. 100%.
It's not, they don't do it sometimes. This is what they do. They know it well and they're focused on it.
Well, and think about from a producer's standpoint or a recruiter's standpoint, where there's tons of resources out there for understanding what graphic designers do, what art directors do. It's much more difficult with retouching because there's no single source of truth, and there aren't a lot of people who have a lot of fluency in the industry of retouching to explain it to them.
Yeah.
So as a producer, I might land on somebody's site and go, "Oh, I guess that retouchers are also always Digitex, or Digitex be, Digitex are retouchers." You could easily make that
Oh, totally.
misunderstanding. And what I do as part of my coaching is portfolio teardowns, because we're all too close to our own portfolios.
Oh, totally.
and one thing that I try to impress on people, retouchers especially, is please make the producer's job easy. Let her know clearly what it is you do. And so from the producer standpoint, another red flag, if you're landing on someone's portfolio website, their profile, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
ask yourself, is this person trying to make it easy on me to know what it is they do and communicate with them and
Yep.
ask them questions? Is there, what kind of friction is in that initial discovery phase? If it's
Mm-hmm.
low friction, it's probably a good bet that that person has awareness of what their craft is, what they do well, and how to communicate it to
Yep.
you so your life is easier, basically.
Oh, totally. And getting back to putting your best foot forward, there's that always that trickle down effect. Mentioning how, if those first few emails you have with somebody when there's a prospective job, just the way like those emails go, sometimes you can tell like what kind of production it's going to be.
Yeah.
Is this producer like totally, buttoned up and like is offering all the information you're looking for, like, without asking, like, you can even within an email or two, you can understand almost the experience of perhaps the people you might be working with, or
Right.
give you a hint of, if it's going to be a good fit or not. Yeah, it's the communication part of it is also, I mean, part of the marketing side of it, especially once you get your foot in the door.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think that's a good point, because I think in those initial emails, it goes both ways. We talk about the retoucher's experience so often, but the producer's experience is really interesting because they often don't know what the sort of vocabulary is, what the tone they need to be taking. Like, am I walking into a car dealership right now, and do I need to make this very like formal? This is purely a financial transaction,
yeah,
or are we engaging with an artist who's going to be collaborating more with us? Like, what's the tone? Because
hmm,
I've seen the tone change after 3 emails that I've had with a new producer who doesn't know me, where it started very formal and very, please send me rates, please send me your
yeah,
availability, all this stuff. And then what I try to do actively is to change the tone, make it a little lighter, so you can really ask me questions a little bit more candidly.
hmm.
Lots of times, just get on
I
the
like
phone
the
call.
more laid back
They
conversation, anyways.
Most producers end up liking that better as well, because they're like, oh, this is a real human being, a creative human being, and we can hop on a call and I can just ask them, like, well, how do you bill? How do you estimate? What do you
Hmm.
do? Do you have a per hour rate? Oh, and then usually you explain that and they go, that makes sense. Like, yeah, why would I care about your per hour rate? Because how long retouching takes,
Yeah,
I have no idea. I'm the producer. So estimate for the project. Give me a quote. I think you probably saw I was thinking of that analogy of, like, if you're about to get your roof on
yeah.
your house redone, and the contractor comes out, you don't go, so what's your hourly rate for redoing roofs? Redoing
Because
my
I know how long it takes to roof.
Yeah, because I've
Yeah,
done so many roofs, so it's probably a 16-hour job.
yeah,
But you're looking for a quote, an estimate. And that's kind of the context. I think that's important too, is when you're hiring contractors in a creative capacity, you're really better off getting that project quote. But if you are hiring internally, because some agencies, photography studios will have retouchers on staff, that's
yeah.
when it makes sense to start discussing hourly rates, of course.
Yeah, I think if you're more educated on the side of how long things should take, or if you're weighing it against, you know, or your own employees, or maybe yourself.
That
Yeah, I can see
that's
that. I
another
can see
point
that.
too. That sometimes I've worked with agencies, bigger agencies that have like an entire admin process. There's a team of HR people. There's a team of finance
Yeah.
people, and they're like, no, we pay retouchers $75 an hour. And I go, okay, what's the job you need done? We'll see.
Hmm.
And sometimes you have to break that project rate down into
Yeah.
an hourly, so that they can just like submit it to their finance department. And so I think that's another thing for producers to know too, is that there's flexibility in there. Like a good retoucher can still work with your project budget,
Hmm.
quote you for the project, and if they're experienced, they might be like, well, if you need it broken down in hourly just for your finance team, no problem, we can make that.
Yeah, we can look at, and I mean, that's a good way to talk about, trying to figure out, it's kind of hard when the client comes to you and they, off the bat, they just give you what they're going to pay. Like, hey, this, we got this project. They give you the details. We have a budget of $5,000,
Yeah.
and then you can determine easily if that's worth it to you or not. But
Right.
if they give you an hourly rate that seems low, we've had producers be more upfront saying, hey, you know what, client is only, they pay this for the retouchers, but you know what, they don't really cap hours. So, we can bill how many hours you want. You think it's going to, if it's, too low of a rate, we'll up the hours, and
Yeah,
it's nice to find producers that are able to work with you like that and find
totally.
flexibility or find some creative ways to bring crew on they want to work with.
Right.
It's not a luxury I think you always get, but on that note, it's like when you find those producers that go to bat for you, those are the ones you want to work with. And
Totally. It works
yeah.
on, both sides of the coin. When both parties kind of understand that there's flexibility
Mm-hmm.
and those initial conversations about budgeting, estimates, billing, admin processes, those are all negotiable. And it's not a pain to figure it out together. Because I think
Yeah.
from both sides, you can think like, oh, well, they have one way they do things. And so I can't ask any more questions or ask them to change their processes, and get that kind of fear like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe I don't know what the industry's like or the standards are like. And I'm going to screw this up if I ask for them to
Oh,
change
I
the
know. I
way.
mean, it's a mindset. And early on, I was like that. Is like saying yes to say yes to everything and bend over backwards, this and that. And as you go through and you realize a lot of times it's not worth it, once they started saying no or asking, hey, can we do it this way or this, the worst thing that can happen is they say no, and
Right.
okay, then we're back to where we were.
Yeah, totally.
But you know what, like a lot of the times, I'd say the majority of the times there's flexibility in there, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, I think this also stands for estimates, deadlines, calendars. If a calendar doesn't really fit nicely with us, we'll come back and say, hey, what if we did this, and we need more time here and here, but we can, most of the time, like, yeah, unless there's some really strict client internal stuff that they need to meet in terms of reviews and stuff, but there's still flexibility around that as well.
Yeah.
Same thing with budgets is, you know, putting stuff out there. I think in that blog post I put, you know, I, I can't remember the last time I sent a budget that was too high. Well, actually, one just happened actually, but it was a weird situation. There was a, putting giving them a too high an estimate that that's reasonable, and they can't fit it, but you know what, we can still talk about it. Maybe we'll adjust the number of assets. We feel that kind of flexibility, or you know, there's at least another conversation in there to try and get it to work. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right?
Right.
But not leaving thinking, oh, like they just went on to the next because one number was too high. So there's always that conversation in there. And when, like when trying to find a good fit with a client, when you're building your client roster as a retoucher or as a client looking for a retoucher, I think being flexible is a, and it can be hard at times, but being flexible is something that I think is completely like people don't talk about it much, but within your comfort zone, it can really help you land jobs. It can help you with the rapport between the client and, kind of make that relationship with them that maybe they want to come back to you because they know they can work with you nicely, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that the more experience I've gained in the industry, the less I say no to work, because I think I've just gotten better at working with clients to find those solutions that fit everybody's needs, that solve everybody's problems. Like you said, it might feel like audacious to ask a client, like, well, can we do fewer images then?
It's a hard ask.
Yeah, you're asking them to change their project scope.
Yeah.
So, yeah, naturally you'd be, a little hesitant to propose something like that if you're new to the game, or you really need to get that job, but
Mhm.
the budget just doesn't look right. I can understand being like, you can't ask them to change their project.
Oh, it's a that or like creatively too. I mean, a lot of times if we're trying to make a budget work, I'll lay out some scenarios and how we could get to a certain budget.
Right.
And sometimes that may be like, hey, we got to make the select down the count of selects, or maybe maybe we can't do image extensions on everything.
Yeah.
Like there's stuff like that, and I'll lay it out there. If maybe they weren't thinking about it before, or maybe it's like you never know because you know maybe the selects was like a wish list and they have some flexibility there or something.
I see that a lot.
Yeah.
I see that a lot where the the selects included a lot of stuff that wasn't absolutely necessary.
Hmm.
And that's an opportunity to be aware of going in, is these might not all be top priority deliverables
Yep.
for this project. So that's a talking point that both producers and retouchers can be aware of, that it's okay to have,
Hmm.
and simply asking the question of like, is there, are there priorities within this list? What is absolutely essential, especially if you're trying to negotiate on making a budget that works?
Yeah, making budget and timelines too is a good way to know, like, hey, which ones do you need by this date?
Definitely.
um no, coming back to this, the overall of being, the flexibility, but also being able to have that kind of candid talk with your client or with the producer or whoever your point of contact is for that project. The easier, I mean, like some of the good clients, I text with them, or it can be very casual, but you can get information fast and ask these questions that, if you sit on them, it could make a difference of something going smoothly or not. So, um,
I used to be so against like giving out my phone number to
I
clients. I
mean,
mean,
yeah, you don't want them calling you at 1 in the morning or
seven,
something,
8 years ago,
demanding
but
something.
it's, but I've come full circle on that. I have some work coming up in a couple weeks, and I was just talking to the producer yesterday. She was checking availability, budget. It was great because I've worked with them before. They're a great client.
Yeah.
The budget range totally hit. She's shooting next week. Uh, Photographer, Digitech on set. Not a lot of compositing, not a lot of heavy post, but I just, in my last email, I was like, you can text me if something comes up next week. Here's my number.
Yeah.
And she was like so happy about that. Chances are that
Nice.
she's not going to text me. But if something comes up, it's like that kind of peace of mind and realizing right off the bat that you're working together
Hmm.
and you're there for support and advice
Yeah.
too. It's not just send me the images. All I do is retouch.
Yeah.
You can work like that, but if you want to really make those lasting relationships, I think making it human, making it real, leaning in and taking as much responsibility as you can to just make their lives easier, their
Oh,
work
totally.
lives easier.
Yeah. And, on that, making lives easier, whether it be client, producer, the whole team that's working on a production, um, I want to pull it back to the marketing side here. And, when you're actually kind of actively perhaps pursuing certain clients. So say you're a retoucher, and you find a brand that you really like and you want to work for them. You want to find out, how can I retouch for you? Or how can I get similar work to what you're doing? Finding those contacts and people to get your foot in the door with is the first thing. But once you do that, how do how are we communicating with them, and what kind of information are we trying to relay to them for them to understand, like, hey, we're interested, and hey, I want to understand if I can actually, make a difference in your production. I earlier on, Emily, my retouching partner, and I would do, we'd make little pitch decks,
Mm-hmm.
where it's just like it's a PDF, branded PDF that we'd make, and it would pretty much lay out, who we were, kind of work we do, and we kind of tailor it to the actual client.
Totally.
So like, if it was a client that was doing a bunch of lifestyle, catalogs or something, we would lay out kind of like our workflow that we would do for something like that. And, sometimes you don't understand their internal workings or how they work and stuff like that. But this is a pitch deck that we usually assemble after reaching out, or after maybe they reach out to us, either way,
Right.
um, regarding, retouching needs. So if we're reaching out to them, it's kind of like, hey, this is who we are. This is what we can do for the type of work you do. If you need any help, let us know. Putting in, laying out everything over a full production, and like the value added you get, it's not just the retouching, but everything else, and letting the client have it, on their computer screen or in their hands, and looking at exactly everything you can do. I think that helps set you apart. And I always talk about the value added when it comes to retouching, because it's kind of the default that, you need to be good at what you're doing. You need to have good work, you need to be good, technically sound retoucher in terms of, what the kind of work you're getting, that, you can turn around what the client wants. But beyond that, I think where you can really make a difference and land clients and keep them around is the service level, the communication, keeping the schedules, being organized, all these kind of things add up. And sometimes too, listing things like when like on estimates and stuff, listing out, the intake and processing of files, the file delivery, listing all those out so they can actually see that, because they need to understand that that's also what you're doing too, and it takes time. It goes both ways for justifying pricing, but also showing them what they can rely on you for, in terms of, what you could offer them in terms of, why they should eventually hire you or try
Totally.
to work with you.
That's,
So
I think, such a great thing for a producer to be aware of too, is like what to expect. It's, perfectly reasonable that I should expect that someone who's interested in working with us uh, might send me a pitch deck that explains to me their process.
hmm hmm
Or, yeah, I was trying to find a retoucher. I found a few, and a couple of them were just like, yeah, go to my website. Yeah, there's my rate on the website. And those kinds of cues of like, what are you gonna expect going forward with that person. I know
yeah,
that if I come to Honey Retouch, it's going to be like white glove, and it's going to be clear what it is, what the process is of how they work. Because think about how nice that is if you have stakeholders in the agency. As a producer, you're like, yeah, these guys gave me this deck. I can just forward it right on through.
hmm
I don't have to write more emails explaining who they are with links to their website. Um, that level of awareness of what your contact's job is, I think, is one of those big points for retouchers to understand.
yeah,
When you show that you're fluent in what they have to do behind the scenes, that you're not their only person that they're managing or working with.
yeah, yeah.
There's a whole bunch back there. You're not their only concern.
hmm
Once again, it gets back to that making the producer's job easier. Here's
Oh,
a
totally.
here's a process deck.
Well, it's
Need
like not
that?
just,
You can
yeah.
just refer to it. Boom.
And it's not just producer, but art. I feel like every art director we work with these days are overworked, and they're on 5 different projects and don't have enough time to eat.
Totally.
So it's like knowing that, you know, them having this, off the bat idea that you're organized, that you're speaking the same language, what goes into these things, what to get out of these things. Um, it's a remembering, maybe they don't need you at that time, but in a year when, oh, we're redoing our creative production line here, and you know what, we are bringing on more people, getting rid of some people, we need a new team here, we need that, like, oh, you know what, I remember I received a deck, or I received this thing from so and so, and I think that's what they do, let's pull it up, let's take a look. um so it's like, yeah, you can be reaching out to people, sending out, creating a customized deck. It's information you could probably have in your site, but the customization part of it,
That's key.
putting like we would do like honey buy, and then we do the name and the brand logo, and like it'd be like it was customized,
Yeah.
and it looked great. Those extra steps. I mean, if you think about if you want to hire somebody out, you want them to be excited to work with you.
Yeah.
You want them to be excited about what you're making. So taking the initiative on yourself, and you know handing something over like that out of the blue unsolicited is like, oh wow, they actually took some time to learn about us. They understand what we do. We obviously see what they do, and and then again, maybe we don't need them right now, but down the line, I'm going to remember this hopefully.
Totally. That feeling that they know what we do is a good point, because same thing when we're having those LinkedIn conversations. I hear so often somebody says, "Yeah, somebody got in touch with me, and the message was just, hey, I really want to work with you." And they're like, "Do you know what I even do? Or you just think I could pay you to work with,
Yeah.
that?" Spending that time and getting familiar with what people do and having a genuine interest, I think, is just always the great first step you can take, because so many retouchers go, terrible at marketing. Like, I just suck at it, man. I know I got to get better. And I'm like, well, what do you think marketing is for you?
Yeah.
I don't know. I got to make more YouTube videos. I got to post more on Facebook. I'm like, why? Well, because that's how you do marketing. I'm like, actually, for me, marketing is doing market research, but market research is really finding out what agencies are, in Portland, Oregon. I know a bunch
Yeah.
of them, but brand new ones pop up all the time. You can do this wherever you live. It doesn't need to be close to you, but you can be like, I'm looking for who's doing cool creative work. What is it? And find their work and find stuff that is genuinely interesting and inspiring.
Yep.
And then ask them some questions about it. Guess what? That's marketing in 2024.
Oh, I think so. I think the personal side to it, I think it's especially in this more of the service side of things, like retouching. It's things are so saturated these days. You like any other time, you got to, you know, leave a good notion. Like 10 years ago, I feel like when we would go out, and we actually had a local person here in Minneapolis that would show us. We had a little iPad. She was actually a photo rep, but she would also take our iPad portfolio around and show ad agencies and stuff our portfolio.
Yeah.
But a lot of the feedback was, oh, we never see anything from post production retouchers and people like that. It's cool to see this kind of stuff. I think I see more of that a little bit these days, but now with social media and some, there's this stuff everywhere, and you're bombarded, and it's hard to be remembered. And I think social media is great. I think it's a good way to communicate with others. But I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm not by any means an expert on social media or any of this, but just from my own experience and flipping through things, it's even for me when I remember seeing something I really liked, I can't remember who it was. I'm like, thank God they have the bookmark thing in Instagram, right? Otherwise, I'd lose track of like anything I see on there.
And
But
we as creatives, we think we're the most important thing in the world.
no, totally, yeah.
Like, of course
Everything
they
we do is
remember.
gold.
Look at all my great work. And they're like, who was that? I can't remember. I can't
Yeah.
be bothered to go Google that person up again.
But it comes down to trying to be that personal touch, and that kind of just having that relationship that you kind of open up with people you end up working with. That's kind of onto that next step of okay, if you're going to land a client, like how do you maintain them? How do they come back to you? Why do they come back to you? And again, it comes back to that good communication and good work.
Right.
If you can align those two, and it works for you, I think those are the clients that end up coming back and staying. But yeah, I mean, on top of all of this, when it's one thing for a retoucher to find a good fit of a client, but touching back on how do you find a good retoucher? in terms of, where they're marketing, if they have websites and stuff like this. I was struggling to really find a good answer of saying, hey, go here if you want to find a retoucher. Besides just saying word of mouth, these guys are good. Like, what resources out there? Like, there's no retoucherlist.com kind of thing, or like accredited retouchers of America. Like, there's nothing really. There's not a necessarily resource like that. I guess you could look at flip through industry magazines and stuff like that and see who's doing posts, if they're even mentioned.
Right.
But what are your thoughts on that? Like, we in the last post we mentioned ASMP or some professional organizations that have lists or local lists, but those are hard to come by as well. I mean, what else is out there for? Is this something that it needs to be made? Maybe I don't know, like something very
I
specific.
Yeah, I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear from producers, art directors, recruiters, uh, if that's a real pain point, because it seems like it probably is. A retoucher isn't necessary for every project, so when they are, you you may not have in like the last 2 years of projects. Maybe
Yeah.
you weren't even having to do any of that work to find that person. So it's tricky for sure. I think that anyone who is um, actively putting together teams should be active on LinkedIn as well. And if they're in a creative capacity, I feel like it's almost our job as the retouchers to be visible. You know,
Hmm. Yeah.
it gets back to that. A thing you said about the custom. What do you call it? The deck, the PDF deck,
Yeah.
making one custom for this client that you're trying to land. I do the same thing when I'm doing portfolio teardowns. Is I go, cool, you do this and you do that and that, and all of those things speak a different language. So you can have three different portfolios, but when I land on this that I like, all these other things are distracting me
Yeah.
and wasting my time, because I think that's the biggest thing with what you were talking about with social media now, and really connecting with people in a way that they're going to trust you,
Yeah.
spend a little bit more time, and then maybe invest in bringing you onto a project.
Hmm.
Time is the currency.
I
So when
can see that.
you're
Yeah.
when you're making that custom deck because you're interested in that client, what you're doing is you're saving them time by being proactive and narrowing down your message so that they immediately can connect with what you're trying to communicate.
Oh, totally.
It's
Yeah.
those basic kinds of things. So it's a great guiding principle for portfolios. It's a great guiding principle for producers on LinkedIn having conversations, hopefully, with retouchers and
Cool. Yeah.
creatives, because they know, well, these are the things that professionals do to let me know who might be best to hire for this next creative project.
Oh, yeah. And on that note, who's the best for me to hire for this project? So you're in front of them, you get their attention. They understand what you do, who you've done it for in the past, all this stuff. But are you actually the right fit for this project? How do I, if it's not by word of mouth and I don't have like some vouched people saying, hey, um, they're great at doing this. I wonder, how do you find out if a retoucher is really good at what they're doing?
Totally.
And I'm bringing this up because there's a question that came out of from one of the listeners from last our other talk was retouching tests. You know, we've been asked to do retouching tests before. Um, as when we hired on other retouchers to help, we do have like a little template retouching test we hand out just to see what people do and how they work. we
Right.
pay for our retouch. Like we pay retouchers to take our tests to see if it's a good work. I know most of the time you're not paid to take a retouching test. I think a lot of times you'll be like, hey, we want to do a test on these 6 images and we'll see if we're good. And like, well, are these 6 images your whole project? Like,
Right. Yeah.
like what's going on here?
I've heard some shady stories
Yeah. What are your thoughts
from
on
the
retouching
past.
tests and like, valid, not valid? Is it something that, I mean, I wouldn't say it's an industry standard because it comes up once in a while and, we don't always issue them unless it's somebody we like their work or maybe they contacted us and they look like a good fit, but we just don't know anything about them.
Yeah, that's a good subject. Actually, there's a lot to talk about there.
This is another one I want to I throw in like 10 minutes to go. So I don't know.
Yeah. So, in short, yeah, like when I was hired at Wyden Kennedy, I was hired because I completed a test first, and I did well enough that they invited me in. I've heard of unpaid tests that didn't go anywhere, and you've wasted a bunch of time. Okay,
Yeah.
sometimes you got to spend time, take the risk. But it kind of gets back to that retouchers doing their job in their communications
Mm-hmm.
to really show potential, hires what it is they do. Because I've got portfolios before that I'm like,
That's the thing,
great,
right? Like,
but
here's my portfolio. This is what I've done before. The quality of work I've handed over before. Even
and
before and afters, you can
before and afters, people ask me,
send those over, work samples. I like the approach of somebody asking for work samples that match a certain project. Like, hey, we're going to be shooting a bunch of, I don't know, I want to go back to food. We're shooting a bunch of,
yeah,
food, tabletop food.
right.
Well, can you send us stuff from your portfolio that would look like this?
Yeah. And when you see somebody who's trying to, fit the square peg into the round hole, red flag, right?
Yeah.
It also gets back to that issue of nuance within the industry in terms of skill sets that producers, it's really kind of rare that they would know those nuances between, say,
Yeah.
you're a retoucher who has a wide breadth of experience in terms of creatively, in terms of technically, print, for instance. I think we had a
Yeah.
question after last wrap party about print specifically, and what goes into that body of knowledge. It's
Yeah.
more and more
Digital
rare.
versus print workflows and how do you manage that?
I think for a producer, they might not know that there's a difference between what I refer to as the digital retoucher and what I refer to as a production retoucher.
Yeah.
And then additionally, you have the digital artist, who's somebody who's really great at putting together really cool visuals and treatments in Photoshop.
Totally. You have a really good infographic on that. Do I try sharing it here? I don't know if it's going to show well, or if we want to have people check out your LinkedIn after.
Maybe try sharing it and see if we can take
Let's
a
see
look, because I think it'd be pretty useful for demonstration purposes.
let's see. Let me know if how that works. Let's see if this shows up well. Yeah. Okay.
Looks good.
It'll be good on the recording.
So I set this up because it's useful to visually see, especially me being a visual thinker, these three silos of expertise in retouching. The Photoshop professional, just the basic, high level skills with Photoshop, with the software. Then the other side is that creative, the artist. So usually we think of it in terms of binary like that, and sort of a spectrum between artist and technical Photoshop professional. But traditionally, there's been this third component, which is pre-press, which is this whole, world of technical and creative expertise that seems to be overlooked a lot, I think, these days, because
Yeah.
we're relying less and less on print. So where these things come together is that sort of, area of strength. So a production retoucher is going to be great at Photoshop. They're going to know all the technical stuff. They're going to be able to, deal with all the different file types, know the nuances.
Mm-hmm.
Usually they're a lot less on the artist side because they're really technical thinkers. Pre-press, they probably have some pretty good experience with that because part of a production retoucher's job really is knowing technical, um, just a big body of technical knowledge for both print and pre-press
Yep.
and
And those
digital.
workflows.
But,
Yeah.
you might not go to them for the creative project, or they may be expecting to get a lot more direction
Totally.
from an art director, and they just execute.
Makes sense. So you broke it down and it looks like four here. So I'm gonna run through them here quick. So the production retoucher, obviously, like you said, very more technical on that side with some pre-press knowledge. Digital retoucher, obviously heavily into the Photoshop Pro, technical technique, tasks, stuff like that. And artist, I think that's rings very true. And yeah, not much pre-press probably if you're solely a digital retoucher, huh?
Right.
Digital artist, yeah, I feel like this is a big category we see with a lot of the Instagram, TikTok, a lot of retoucher stuff I see on there is some really cool work.
It's
But a lot of
easy.
times I'm like, what kind of client is hiring for that?
It's really
Like,
easy to blow people away with really cool visuals
yeah,
and not have any way to take that to, you know,
like a
to
commercial.
ship as part of a commercial
Yeah,
project.
yeah,
Very little, if any at all, pre-press understanding, and knows how to do cool stuff in Photoshop, but probably doesn't know how to tidy it all up from a
hmm
technical standpoint.
yeah. The balanced retoucher. Oh yeah, love it.
So, not that necessarily one of these is going to be just inherently better than the other. I think it's just helpful seeing where those expertise lie in this kind of triad, so producers can make better decisions about what they're seeing in a portfolio. Where does this person who's applying for the job lie? And this job is just highly production, so I'm going to get a production retoucher, somebody who
Yeah,
shows major understanding of technical stuff, because we don't really need a lot of creativity applied to this job.
yeah. And like how you have this laid out here too. And when we're talking about kind of industry standards and stuff, there's terminology like this. Other industries have terminology like this for certain parts of their job aspects, so you can understand what they do within their role and how they do it and stuff like that. Being more descriptive of the kind of retoucher you are and how you market that could help you find better fits for incoming work.
Right.
People know you're a creative compositor. I think, I feel like a lot of the creative and the artistic side of things, it's easier maybe to tell kind of their direction mindset, the kind of work they do than, um, you know, like if you look at a balanced retoucher, like I kind of feel like for Emily and I and Honey, we're in a balanced, kind of more in the balanced area. And it might be kind of hard exactly, we do a lot of different things. So we get inquiries for a lot of different things, but
Right.
um, you know, I still maybe I should like try to distill down, the kind of inquiries we get and why we get them.
I,
That might be interesting.
yeah, and I think too these categories can change over time for an individual retoucher.
Oh, totally.
I think over a career, you have much more opportunity to become this balanced retoucher.
Hmm.
If you're lucky enough to get exposure to print and all the stuff that has to do with pre-press, we're needed for pre-press jobs way less these days because way less print is produced. But when print is produced, if you have a retoucher who doesn't have experience in it, it can shut down the entire project. So
Yeah.
it's good to know that up front. You can have
Being able to
great
ask the right questions.
you can have great
Yeah.
digital retouchers who are really technical, really creative, and they can totally finish the job fine until you get to a point that prepress is involved and they go, I mean, I can do a CMYK conversion, but
Yeah.
limiting ink,
What about all this other stuff? Yeah.
yeah. So it's just something to be aware of. And what we're trying to do in these conversations is give some practical tools, help give some, understanding of the industry, and just make those jobs easier.
Yeah. Well, we had a big list here to go upon. And again, it's like this hour's too short to talk about everything we want to talk about. But, as we wrap up here, I want to let me double check my list here. I just want to make sure there's nothing easy, low hanging fruit we can cover here quick. Yeah. Well, like back against the retouching tests. Sure, it's a heavy one. I would leave with it saying if it's a very small ask, like something that may take you like maybe if it's for a smaller job or something, or I wouldn't do a test that would take me more than 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Honestly, even if it's for a huge job, is because it's. I don't feel like it's necessarily the norm, especially for the work. I guess the work we do, but
Well, it's going to be
I
tough for a producer too. Think about that. For a producer hiring for a project,
yeah,
she might not even know how to evaluate a test, even if there was one to
you
give.
can
You know,
understand or this or that.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, maybe if it's a retouching house looking to hire internal retouchers, I could see
yeah,
that makes more sense to me
definitely.
because they know what goes into it and how to parse all that. So, but yeah, yeah. I mean, we're out of time. I think you'll probably be on with me again here soon. We'll
Probably.
talk about more good things. The topics about print. We had some inquiries about print and digital workflows and stuff. We definitely need to have an hour on that because heck, we may have 2 hours on that because there's a lot that goes into that. Everything from jobs that require both, that one that's print first or digital first, who knows, and all the wonderful things that go into there and what you need to think about beforehand before jumping into a project. But yeah, for today, what are you up to this weekend? Where can people find you? What projects are you on? Like, what's
This
up?
weekend, it's finally sunny in the Pacific
Yeah.
Northwest, so I'm going to go outside. You can find me, you can go to my website at aesthetic-machine.com. But the easiest way to connect with me is on LinkedIn, Sef McCullough. You can
LinkedIn's where it's at.
see how to spell that last name in the show notes. And yeah, great. I hope we can have those technical conversations down the road about print versus digital, all the stuff that goes into that. But hopefully, this first two episodes we did becomes a resource for some producer out there who's just trying to figure out the best way to find the right retoucher to hire.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And that's what we're here for. That's what we want to keep talking about. Again, the verybusy.io blog, verybusy.io/blog. We're putting up good content here. Seth has, we got two different blog posts from you coming up. It's a two-parter
Right.
that he'll be throwing up there. So stay tuned for that. And our next wrap party will be, is it next week? Look out on the socials for the invite. But we're going to be diving into starting your own retouching business, how to get started, transitioning into being a retoucher, everything that goes into that kind of stuff. We got a great guest for that. So stay tuned on socials for all that information. And yeah, thanks for coming, Seth.
Yeah, it's
We'll
been
talk to you
great.
soon again.
Thanks for having me.
See ya.